Welcome. I'm Brigadier General J.B. Vowell, the Deputy Commanding General for Operations at the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, and this is the second in a series of better training and leader development. Today we're going to focus on a better live fire experience, a better live fire exercise. We're going to reference FM 7.0, Chapter 3, and Appendix C from the October 16 manual, and also the 10-step training model that we talked about on the last chapter of this better training and leader development episode. So let's talk first about train versus evaluate. You need to understand the construct of how we train versus evaluate. If we look at our little stick figures here for this platoon live fire, I've got a platoon leader and a company commander and a battalion commander or squadron commander. The primary trainer for this platoon leader in this event will be the company commander. The primary evaluator in this event is going to be that Lieutenant Colonel 05 battalion commander, and there's reasons for that. This commander has a responsibility to be actively involved in the execution of the training event, being part of the training. The battalion commander is in a position to evaluate. We'll talk more about that. So how do we focus and position ourselves to better train and evaluate throughout? Well, one key aspect is planning your AAR process up front. And this is where we see in our own units, some units don't put due diligence forward to how they collect information during the training event for the use in an after-action review later on in the 10-step training model. So let's talk about a few of these things. When we plan the training, way back in the beginning of our training model process, we want to select the training evaluation outlines and those key critical factors and events that we want to evaluate. So as we select those TNEOs, let's say they're perform actions on contact, breach a mine wire obstacle, establish support by fire, etc. We pull those out of the Combined Arms Training Strategy. We go down that list. There are key individual, leader, and collective events that we want to evaluate. Well, that's great. So how do we make sure that this training event is going to meet these standards? We're going to have to train our observer team, our collection plan, if you will, on what those standards are, and specifically what the commander wants to look at and evaluate. Maybe there's some more critical tasks he wants to look at in actions on contact versus an establishment of support by fire. But that discussion needs to happen. So when we train and certify leaders in the process, we're not just making sure the unit is ready to train and conduct the training event. We are going to train, educate, and certify the OCs on what to look for, how to look for it, and how we're going to run AARs. So we should have a subject matter expert or somebody who's trained to evaluate and observe. In this platoon live fire example, we've got several squad leaders and a weapons squad leader and a platoon leader. You'll want to position OCs trained to observe the behavior of these maneuver squad leaders and the weapons squad leader. So maybe that experienced squad leader has somebody from a parent or similar organization that's looking at the established support by fire drill for the platoon level collective task in this exercise. And that person's going to follow and observe. We've all been there, we've seen that. But this person is now ready to execute this because we've taken the time to train and certify him or her on exactly what we want to look for. Now that's pretty important because when we do this, we've got to rehearse this process of collection along with the unit that trains. They've got to rehearse their exercise on the training resource itself, the land, the range. The OCTs, your evaluators, have got to be rehearsing what they're going to collect as well. So they're in the right position. They've walked through the model and we walk through an AAR process. So let's walk this diagram on how to make a better live fire because we're going to be better positioned to train, evaluate, and assess our plan. So in this model, once again, platoon is forward of this dashed line. We call them green. They are entirely tactical. They are the training audience. They're going to perform and execute the training. Below this dashed line, I call the company command element or battery or troop command element that gray level inside this exercise construct. Why? Two reasons. He or she is green and tactical. They are talking to that platoon leader on whatever radio nets, etc. While this action happens in the live fire, this commander is receiving the reports from actions on contact from the platoon leader. Those are directly pulled out of tasks from the training evaluation outline. Things that the platoon leader has to do to send reports higher. So he or she has a tactical role in this. But they also have a little bit of a white hat, meaning they're responsible for setting the conditions for the training event to happen. Talking to the OCs, controlling targetry, and making sure some of those support functions of the lane itself, or in this case the platoon live fire, is enabled. Here's the big distinction some people don't consider. If we're talking about the trainer and the evaluator, the person who trains that platoon leader, the person who evaluates and looks at potential of that platoon leader is the battalion command, squadron command level, that 05. He or she is almost, in this case, entirely in a white or an evaluation role. They're not receiving tactical reports. They're not part of the tactical play. They are positioned to observe the behavior of this platoon leader. So a battalion commander walking the lanes for blank fires and for live fires, that's their responsibility, to be in that position to evaluate the effectiveness of their potential, while the company commander, battery troop commander are in a position to supervise the training and the execution of the battle drills and the actual tasks that come out of the TNEOs. So here's some things to think about when you set up this construct. Think about the communications architecture for that platoon leader. They're going to have some sort of platoon internal net. They're going to have to probably have a forward observer. They'll probably have an RTO on company net. So there's at least 3 radios or systems to communicate that this platooner is going to be responsible for. There may be more. You may make that less, just depending on how you set the exercise, but consider what they're responsible for. Not only just MTO, but if they're controlling other resources, they might have other communications with outside elements that might be part of their task organization. So we bounce down here to the company level. The company commander, both green tactical and white hat supporting the training event itself, has got a lot of responsibilities. He or she's got to have an RTO on their company net, that platoon leader is reporting to, RTO on battalion net, if they want to report to a battalion level CP, fire support officer, fire support NCO, so fires net to control fires, and maybe they've got an RTO to listen in on the platoon internal net. Well, why would a company commander want to listen in the platoon internal net? Because if they're monitoring the execution of the event, they can hear on the platoon internal, when he tells that company commander to do something, he's listening to how this platoon leader sends those instructions forward to the squad leaders. He's going to be able to monitor that net. And that's instructive and illustrative for how you can listen in to this net and use this later on in the AAR. Also, if this is an administrative or white hat role here for this company commander to make sure the outside support for the training is being executed correctly, there might be an OC net. How do I control the OCs who are behind all these squad leaders? And maybe another one for the platoon leader. How do I control that during the execution of the event? You might want to consider how you do that. There are different techniques, radios, less hand and arm signals, but some form of communication to make sure there's command and control of the exercise. 2, targetry. If there's a response to stimulation for targetry, how is that being controlled? Some of the remote devices that we have that are available for some of the ranges across the United States Army have a remote box that you walk with. So who is that person trained and supervised to run that? If it's a range division personnel, have we synchronized and rehearsed that targetry piece? If it's a captain from the S3 shop, has that same condition been met? Have they been trained and certified to run it? And oh, by the way, if I'm responsible for training as a company commander, I've got to be able to tell this person when and where to lift targets, remove targets from the disposition of the platoon in front of them, and control the stimulation of response in front of this platoon. That's happening at this level. And then lastly, a consideration, if you're keeping a little bit of tactical multi-echelon play, well, maybe your SOP is, in some units you'll find this, that platoon leader is reporting back to a company XO at a command post. So the company CP gets an exercise in receiving information, analyzing information, processing information for the company commander forward. And many units tactically perform this way. So have you set up a company command post to act tactically? And this is another element that the commander can talk to on a company net. The command and control of a live fire event at this level starts to become expansive. It's not just tactical, it is supportive in nature. Lastly, battalion commanders out there have a responsibility to walk those blank and live iterations day and night to make sure the conditions have been met for them, the platoons in this case, to transition into those more difficult conditions. So if he's mostly in the evaluator role, I would submit to you he's probably got an RTO or a company net that he's able to talk to this commander, an OC net to talk to all the OCs. He might have a battalion net if you want to multi-echelon that play. That's a decision for each unit to consider, but maybe not. Maybe a fires net as well, so you can monitor the fires play and the employment for the instructive purposes of AAR later on. And then perhaps somebody's helping him with the administrative logistics piece of the range itself, or at least he's got a command post tied back here. He can talk on an admin net. When's the next platoon moving in serial? When's the next support coming up? And then also, if there's any medical play that happens on the range, a medivac net that range division will most likely have units on. That can exist anywhere, but making sure somebody has that echelon of command and control back in that area. Some other considerations before we close. Once you've done this, evaluated the exercise, because you've trained your evaluators, your OCTs, what to look for, you're going to come back over with all this and this information, and you're going to have what I would call the ref's huddle, the referee's huddle. It's just like a football game. You got a sideline judge, backfield judge, etc. When the play is called, they've got to kind of congregate and figure out what they look for. They're trained to observe behavior, what was right, what was wrong. No different than my OCs. Come back here with the trainer and the evaluator, in this case the battalion commander, and figure out what are the key facets we want to bring out. There might have been 50 things we can talk about in AAR, but we don't have enough time or altitude to talk about everything. We want to make the most impact of our training. So we select 3 to 5, and we bring that into the AAR. So this ends because we've trained and certified our leaders on what to look for. We've rehearsed the observer collection plan behind the element they're collecting on. And then we come together and we figure out how to make this AAR more instructive. Some thoughts about that. In your AAR plan, if you've got instrumentation, if you've got sand tables, if you've got visual aids, the more the better. So consider those when you actually conduct your AAR. The more you can bring out soldiers' comments over the terrain they fought on, either an instrumented view or a terrain model, the better. Think about in your live fire your throughput analysis, the dry, blank, live. If I'm certifying platoons in an infantry battalion in this example, it's going to take some time. And then building in retraining time and recovery time and transition is decisive going from dry, blank, live. The authority and decision to move from dry to blank, blank to live. Work that out. Battalion commanders, company commanders to platoon leaders, what does that look like? At what point have they reached the training standards to be met to condition forward? And last thing, training aids, devices, simulators, and stimulation, I would call it. We talked about targetry a little bit before. Get diabolical and stimulating the response you want from your soldiers to react to contact, perform actions on contact, put lead or steel on target. That's decisive. Some examples. If you have a flagging issue in a close quarters drill inside an inter-building clear room drill, for example, have soldiers fix bayonets. It's amazing what happens when you put a bayonet on an M4 rifle. It suddenly becomes a deadly weapon. Never mind the 28 to 30 rounds that are in the magazine well. You'll watch the psychological behavior of your soldiers now paying attention to their muzzle awareness inside close quarters. There's all sorts of ways you can get around this with targetry, with pyrotechnics and simulations to stimulate responsive fires from the enemy. If you're in a blank fire exercise, consider dynamic OP4 as opposed to targets that are being popped up. So there's a more free play from the positions where you normally have target, an aggressive, an OP4 force that can counter-task in the blank iteration against that platoon. So there's a lot more that you can involve multi-echelon inside that battle drill, for example. Hope this has been instructive for you. Some thoughts about how to make your live fire program better, be it a table gunnery, prescriptive tables, or a dynamic live fire out on the range. Look forward to seeing you out there training. Thanks.